What did we get our balance like within 1 gram or something?
Should we start with all right or so?
Ready to rock and roll.
All right. So.
It's all right. All right, here we are with our Redline rebuild of our 1969 396 engine. And this is just a little snippet of snow in Traverse City. This doesn't show the other 2 feet on the ground. But note, that's fresh snow for the morning, and there's no salt, no nothing. Kind of cool to take a ride in a Camaro that doesn't run very well through the parking lot.
We resisted the urge to do donuts in it.
Yes, yeah, we didn't feel that would have been appropriate.
Give me a little bit of background on this car.
Oh, certainly. So this car was actually totaled out a couple years back, and we purchased it so we could do a training end of things with our employees. So we do employee restorations, and I headed up the restoration on this 69 SS 396 Camaro. It has 4-speed Muncie. It fairly numbers matching car, I mean, for the most part, but it was crushed, to use our fancy laser pointer, from the headlight to about halfway to the wheel well here on this side. It had also been sideswiped, and it had a lot of sins from previous repairs. And there wasn't a panel that didn't have filler. So, and I mean lots of filler. But yeah, so we completely stripped this down, put it all back together, and refurbished the motor at that time. That was roughly 5 years ago. It's been cross country, shoot, a dozen times or better, I guess. And driven by a lot of people. It's been driven hard. It's kind of lived a hard life because it's in our driving experiences, which are during the summer. They idle a long time. It's gone through a couple different clutches because we're teaching people how to drive in this vehicle. And it's also been, like I said, on a great race one time, and did very well. But yeah, so the motor started burning some oil.
This Redline Rebuild Explained is different than our others in the sense that you guys already, most of you probably watching have some background on this already because we've been doing our Redline Update videos.
Yes, which is new for us, so
yeah,
we're glad everybody's been kind of digging that. So that's
for
cool.
sure. When we'll, we will get back into our Buick and we'll get back into our Model A here very shortly.
Yes.
Yep. And but yeah, you guys, there's a lot of stuff that's sort of known by anyone watching, but we'll recap some stuff and probably refer back to some of those videos, and one of which is what you're just about to talk about, which is what the problem was with consuming oil. Right. And we'll leave a link up here.
It's usually here.
This side.
Okay, that side?
On the right side.
All right.
To the specific video where Davin goes through and diagnoses all that stuff. But yeah. Give us the sort of 30-second rundown.
Yeah, so this 30-second rundown is it's burning oil, it's not leaking anything. It's running horrible. Pulling plugs, they're horrible. It's got oil worse in one cylinder than it does all of them, but they all have some. And we do a quick compression test. We do a dry, then a wet, and we do a leak down test. At the end of the day, we're convinced that it's not the valves, meaning the valve seals are not leaking. And it appears to be all in not all, worse in number 3 than it is in the rest of the cylinders. The plug was basically no gap based on oil and crust in there. Mm-hmm. That was just nasty. And that's the way I feel in the morning after about 4 cups of coffee.
Yeah. Now, of course, this is just a teaser bit going through here of quick shots that are maybe a few frames, but I left this in here because it's fun.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that though, but yeah, that's just a quick teaser of, yes, it was worn. It had It had lived a hard life the last 5 years.
And for everyone out there that says, that should have lasted longer than that, they're 100% true.
Yep.
That's 100% correct. And in circumstances where it's 100% perfectly maintained, which I'm not saying that we do not maintain our cars because that's not the case, but when they do go out on the road, some things happen, people aren't aware, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I know specifically this was run at some point with about 2 quarts of oil in it, and we can see what happens.
Let's get into this. Pulling the engine. Anything in particular?
Nope,
Interesting
pretty
about
straightforward. It's very nice to have a little extra hand, though, getting the hood out of the way, because I did the paint work on this and body work, and I really hate to do it twice. But no, as far as it's straightforward, drain the cooling system, disconnect the 4 wires, 2 wires going to the coil and distributor and the alternator, and that's it from a wiring standpoint. That part of it's beautiful. And get the exhaust down enough so you can, obviously disconnect it from the exhaust manifolds so the motor can come up and out.
But you, in previous stuff, we've pulled engines with the transmission attached, and you just...
Yeah, I didn't want to do that here. Well, I didn't do it here because of a manual transmission comes out so easy, and you can just leave the bell housing on. It's nice and short. You don't have to have such a ridiculous approach angle to get in and out. Mm-hmm. Even with the hoist, you got a lot of room.
But you just were able to just yank it out of there.
Yeah.
Hoses, fan, accessories.
Yeah, that's always tricky right there. So I got the fan out there, but typically you end up pulling the shroud. The shroud fan is always so close. It can be a little bit of a order thing to get that out. But and I stripped down the front of this motor because I couldn't remember exactly how much room I had. So that's why in this at the teardown, I take everything off I can off the front of the engine and make it as short as possible.
So there it is.
Yep, here it is. It's
not as grimy as...
It's a little, not as grimy as some, but it's dirty. It needed a good wipe down. It's kind of apparent to me that the intake, the in seals are leaking on this and probably needed to be checked up on the torque on the intake manifold at some point in time. And I think we see this a little later as well because...
Well, as we went through it, there were definitely some spots where things were looser than maybe they should have been.
Yep. Which happens as it heat cycles. You start to, everything's moving around, and it's a good idea to go back through there. So everybody note the beauty of the trees in the background, snow covered.
Snow's melted off the...
We did donuts right after that, I think.
All right, there it is, ready to get the treatment.
Yep. So there's been some questions, and we'll see it as we go here.
Yep.
I know there's been, get my pointer out. There's been some question of what these tubes are. And what this is the California air emissions system of the day. So in '69, what they did is they have there's an air pump that runs off the accessory belt. And literally what it did is it diluted the exhaust with more air. So it didn't improve the efficiency of the motor. In fact, it took efficiency away because you're yanking a pump around and dragging it, if you will. So that was actually a big performance upgrade as people would pull that pump off and then just literally put pipe plugs in here. And most of the time you cannot, they make these in the aftermarket now for the restoration side of things, but originally these are thrown away. Because the system was dumb. Yeah. It really didn't do anything.
And we talked about this in some of the update videos as well, but this is, in addition to this being a driving teaching tool, this car is also used as just kind of a general teaching about old cars in general.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so having something like that is a nice thing to, when you pop the hood and some kid goes, man, what's that?
Exactly.
Then you can say, well... and give them the explanation that you just gave.
Yep, exactly.
I think it's funny that those were all they did was add air.
Just add air.
It wasn't making, it just...
Solution to pollution's dilution, right? As they used to say.
Yeah. Stuff coming off, as usual.
Nice original chrome valve covers.
One of the concerns, I think, you can see it here, right?
Yeah, so again, we're still in the... call it diagnostic phase, right? Because we're still trying to see where this oil's going into the runners, into the intake. So this is in the intake side of the heads, and you'll see that every one of these has some amount of oil, or appears to be oil, in the runners. Now, this is the front of the engine, so right here is number 3. It really doesn't look worse. This one looks, this would be 6. 6 looks worse than the rest of them as far as the consumption is concerned. But what I noted is every one of them has oil down in this edge of the seal. So my suspicion is that intake manifold just was not sealing as well. So what happens is on your intake stroke, as it has vacuum being created within the cylinder chambers, it's drawing fuel down through that intake runner, and it can, if there's a leak into the valley, it'll also drag oil in with it.
We're just, I keep thinking it's a projector, but
Yeah.
you can see the gun.
Yeah, there you go. Yep, perfect. Yep.
Again,
That's another possible path for it, or possibility. And really at the end of the day, what we've kind of come to is there's no one particular smoking gun. Literally everything was smoking. So a whole lot of little things. So between the intake and between potentially being overheated at some point with the rings, compression was decent, but it wasn't grand.
This next shot here, people were quite jealous of your engine that
Disassembles itself?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that takes you have you always have these the folks that do, like Caesar that does the talking to the dogs and the animals that whisper.
Yeah.
Well, you have to spend some time with it and whisper, the rules of how things are going to go.
And sometimes they don't listen, so you got to do it yourself.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it takes some, you got to provoke them.
People were happy to see your speed wrench.
Oh, speed wrenches are the best.
Because I won't let you use power tools.
I don't use them anyway. I mean, I do, but I wouldn't have used them on that.
It just goes too fast. It's not as artistic when you're just firing stuff off with them.
And those heads are heavy. Just as a general number, they're like 80 to 90 pounds, somewhere around there. They're definitely no small block.
Yeah, we don't have the audio from this clip. Oh, wait,
No.
there's a
they're right there. Yeah, that says it all.
Yep. Oh, that's a good one too. The grunt face.
Oh, yes. And it would be as hard if I was a little taller. I mean, I should get a stool.
Yeah.
I'm a little taller there.
Wear some thicker boots.
Buy a good puller.
Yep.
If you're going to do any engine work, I mean, I should say good. Buy a puller. They're not expensive. You can get into a cheap puller like 20, 30 bucks, and you need it to install it as well. Don't beat your thrust washer or thrust bearings up.
There are times for a hammer and times not for a hammer.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. It just slides the thing right off.
Just pulls it right off. There's like a thou clearance there.
And I will apologize for. We were gung-ho trying to get this thing done to hit a deadline, and we missed in some of the Redline updates some of the things where I think you actually go through and explain.
Oh, okay.
But fortunately for us, we're going to be constantly rebuilding engines. So
we'll revisit the same idea again.
We'll take the time to hit stuff that we missed
Yep.
when it comes to the Buick or any future engines.
Right. So it comes. Now this had a flat tappet camshaft, so hydraulic lifters, but a flat tappet.
Gotcha. And we're not reusing that.
And we're not reusing it, no.
Some more self-disassembly.
Do you notice how fast they spin out? They actually throw oil up onto the pan. Do you see that?
I see that.
See, look at right there. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, there definitely was no oil on my fingers after that. Was there anything, when you pulled the pan, anything that you saw down here, any shrapnel, anything?
The only thing I found was there was no metal or none of that, but I found pieces of grommet from the PCV valve at some point in time during the rebuild to this point, where that rubber grommet had crystallized, we'll say, and must have fell in there because it was in the pickup of the oil pump. Nice. Remember we were pulling them chunks out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I finally decided that's what those were.
We were wondering what that was.
Yep.
So out come the pistons, out comes the crank, and then we'll get to a shot here in terms, well, you can see it a little bit.
Right here you can see it. You're looking at the bearings to understand where things were at. Now, we had no knock and none of that type of thing, but that amount of wear, you see the brass going through the bearing material.
Yep.
That's a little much. I mean, that looks like, I wouldn't expect that after, I don't know, say 50,000 miles, not 20, 30. So it was getting.
Yeah, you can see it down here on the other side too. It's very apparent, even not a close up.
Right.
And that is most likely a result of the times where it had very little oil.
Where it had very little oil in it, yes. Yep. Right. And when you get here, we can see.
This is what it should look like.
Yep, that's a good one. That's actually ended up being an intake, but the point is the same. The exhaust will show up on the exhaust first. Exhaust valves obviously get hotter than the intake valves, just by pure what they're doing, intake versus exhaust. And so your exhaust needs more oil to keep things lubricated and cool, and you can see what happens when it doesn't. This is mushroomed over, and at some point in time, either we got really lucky that the hydraulic lifters were set deep enough, if you will, or when you set the lash, you preload the lifters on hydraulics, and that was preloaded enough that amount of wear didn't show up as a clatter.
Okay.
Now, my suggestion is it probably did clatter, but whatever. But yeah, that is not good at the end of the day. No matter how you slice it, this is bad. Really, really bad.
The close up.
Yeah.
No, that's, you can see it's cracked. It's just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't the only one that was like that. Almost all the exhausts.
Yeah, about every exhaust. None of the intakes were, but all the exhausts were. To the point where we had to grind them off to get them, of course, down through the guide.
Now looking at this right here, is all that garbage, in a sense? You're not reusing any
we
of that?
we could have reused the push rods. The rocker arms, you could have reused all the intake rockers, but on the exhaust side, some of them had a little notch, of course, with the heat. I don't recommend reusing timing chains and gears. I mean, unless you know you just put them in there and they have no miles on them or something. The camshaft was starting to show some wear. Went through and mic'd it out, and it was starting to get a thou or two here or there. But again, it's time. It was time for an upgrade as well, meaning in stock form it was fine, but it needed a little bit more.
Bring that excitement.
Yeah, get a little excitement. I mean, it's Hugger orange, for God's sakes. It shouldn't accelerate less than a Toyota Camry.
Right.
A beige one. So, just my opinion.
That was our mission.
That was my mission. Other than eating that bagel.
A few people caught it, although some of the comments said it was a donut. But
bagel loaded with cream cheese. Heck yeah.
So first step when we hit Thurlby is always
bacon. Clean and bake. Bake and clean. Yeah. So bake, tumble, wash, right?
Yep.
Or over here already to the head. So we gave them I'll call it the fold treatment. We put brand new seats in it all the way through. Intake and exhaust. I didn't want anything left to suspect.
And also
brand new, they refer to them as K-liners, but new liners in the guides. Yeah. So the guides weren't destroyed, they just needed a fresh liner pushed into them. And then of course, reamed out to size, and that's everything is good.
But then over to our seats.
Yep. So cut the old seats out, put brand new seats in.
And you're using hardened seats here?
Hardened seats on the exhaust, yes.
So, as far as fuel goes and stuff, you're...
Yeah, that way there's no issues with the non-unleaded fuels.
Right. But yeah, this is a process that we've seen a bunch of times. It's still cool. Every time we go in there, I'm just mesmerized by all the stuff. And we are fortunate to have a shop like Thurlby right in our small town.
Yep.
And they're completely building engines for people.
Yeah, they have been. Yep, they started doing that.
Which is
again.
Cool.
Yep.
I saw a billboard the other day.
Yeah. Yep. So we decked we decked out the cylinder head, cleaned it up. Now,
This is something new.
yeah, so right here we got a little new. In the other, was that just the heads before, or was that the block as well?
On
Getting
the,
decked?
it was both.
Okay.
Both the heads and the...
So question here, I know the folks that are all worried about numbers. So go ahead and back up to the milling. Okay, we can stop there for right now. All right, so the question has always been, well, when you deck the block, you will lose the numbers that are stamped on the block. Because that number pad on a Chevy is right here above this, above the water pump. So it's right here on this deck. It's out on the outside edge, so it's not part of the sealing surface. That comment is 100% correct. When you deck it, you will take the stamping out of here because they're hand stamped at the factory. And from, I think it's 68 up there, the VIN number actually, the last couple digits of the VIN number is in that sequence to match it 100% to that car. Now, in this case, the casting number is what would have been in that car. When we got the car, it had already been cut off.
Okay.
So there was nothing to save.
Gotcha.
So we just cleaned it off and decked it. Now, however, if you want to save that, you can still deck the block. What you have to do is stop that big cutting wheel short.
Yep. Which we've done with...
Which we did with something else. I don't remember what it was.
Either the 289 or the...
Yeah, I don't remember.
Maybe the
It might have been some, no, it was another project.
Gotcha.
But anyhow, you can stop short and leave those in there. Your machinist will not want to do that because it's, well, a pain.
More work.
It's more work. So anyhow, just to address that, that's what can be done. So relative to this block, when measuring this block, it had 30 over pistons in it. It had already wore to 40.
Oh, wow.
And
Not that it was that much.
Yeah. So, and actually it was almost closer to 45. So it was war. We opted not to do a typical bore and hone, bore-wise, because the next size piston is 60 thou. So we were only like 15 thou away from that. So what we opted to do is use a torque plate, which is what this big plate on top, this blue torque plate. And the idea is you torque that down, it distorts the bores, just like it will be when the head is torqued down, but it obviously has a big through hole, so you can run the hone up and down through there. Now this is a very typical function to do on like a race engine, where you got a little higher RPM and you're really trying to squeeze all the horsepower out of it. Normal street applications, this really isn't, I don't want to say it's not necessary, it's just not done. It's an extra charge, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
So, but what we did is we put in a little more aggressive hone and basically used the hone to take that material out. So normally we would only hone maybe, a few thousandths to get that final size. In this case, we actually used the hone to cut. Okay. Again, an aggressive hone, so it would cut that cylinder out, and it did a very nice job. Does a very nice job. So that's why this is slightly different than what we've done in the past.
So the short of it meaning that when it's torqued down, it's a perfect cylinder.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So the side part of that is when you do all your measurements assembly-wise. You could have some stuff that you're like, hey, my bore's not round.
Which way
exactly.
you measure it.
Yeah. So you just have to be aware of that. And it really only comes in when you're filing rings and getting that set. So you might have to have a ring. Your rings might need to be open just a little bit more if you can't get the pistons down the hole.
Of the piston assembly, we're reusing the rods.
Correct.
But new piston heads and new hardware?
Yeah, so we're using, so we pushed out the bolts, we put fresh ARP bolts in as far as the rods are concerned, resized the big end and the small end, and we stuck with
So here he's just
cleaning
off the surfaces of the
Yeah, he's sizing the rods on the width, the caps and that. So,
and then makes them circles again and sizes them.
Yep.
So yeah, all stuff that we've talked about before. And if you're super interested in any of this, I'm sure we go into more in depth of it in.
And we opted to reuse the rods for the horsepower we're going to make. They'll be fine. We're also going to reuse the crankshaft. It did need to be turned. Now, in this, for this motor, I'll say tried a little different process, and somebody's going to be like, well, duh, you should always be doing it that way. Well, typically what you do is you measure your crankshaft and you say, okay, it's not within spec anymore, and that spec has a range. So then what you'll do is you send it out and you have the crank grinder will cut it to some, the next side, 10 over, 20 over, and it's still in a spec range. Now that range you could fall into where you have bearings that are at the large end, as far as the ID would be concerned, and then your OD on your crank could be at the small end, and that it's possible that you stack up and have a little more oil clearance than you wanted. I wanted to have 2.5 thousandths on both the rods and the mains, so what I did is we took and we torqued down bearings just like we do when we check them at assembly. We just did it ahead of time. So we put a main cap on, put a bearing in, measured it, and then said, okay, I need this specific size on the mains, I need this specific size on the rods.
Now there was a question in terms of, and we've done this before and we've talked about this before, but when it is and is not necessary to do a line hone to make sure all of your mains are are straight, right?
Yes.
Or in line.
The biggest time to do that is when you don't have, you're either changing main caps or you don't have the original main caps.
Okay.
I know that's a very vague statement, and there'll be plenty of people screaming that, no, you gotta do it all the time. No, I don't believe that's the case. In a street engine, I don't think you need to have it a line hone unless something like that is changing. Because you start to get, when you do a line hone, you could get into issues relative to your timing chain. Because it tends to move that crankshaft a little bit, so you could start to get into some other differences there. I tend to stay away from it whenever I can.
Give it a little polish, and then what's he doing here?
All right, so what he's doing here is it's kind of a polite thing to do for the next person that opens this motor up. You already wrote on there, it's a 396 crank, the mains are 20, and the rods are 20. So 20 on the crank would be undersized, and then 20 undersized on the rods.
Gotcha. All right, now we're over at Apex.
Yep, Apex Competition Engines to do the balance work. He happens to be like, 45 minutes, half hour, roughly, half hour east of the guy that grinds crankshaft. So that was
we did it all in a day.
Yeah, we did it all one day. It was very convenient, and they were very accommodating to us. And they build some really sweet engines on a race standpoint.
You might see in the background up here and whatnot that there's some cool engines in there for sure. So we did it for the Hemi.
We balanced the Hemi, and I can't remember if we balanced. I don't think we balanced anything else.
No, I think that was it.
So we balanced the Hemi, and we balanced the Hemi relative to what it was going to be used for. Again, race application, a little higher RPM. Now, the reason I balanced this engine, because it is a street motor, I was changing pistons. We're cutting the crankshaft had been balanced before. It was just one of those things like, you know what, let's balance this because it seems I have a really big mismatch of stuff. And I knew there was a gear in its future. So instead of going just from that 307, 308 gear, I wanted to take it to a 342 gear, which on the highway, it'll run a little bit higher RPM. So to get away from the folks that'll be like, oh, you can't turn a big block that fast all that time. Well, you can if you balance it. So for the couple $100 in the afternoon, it made a lot of sense just to have it balanced and not have to be concerned about it. And we get it balanced relative, it's at the end of the day, we're like a gram, within a gram. And the idea is, and there's a, and I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but I think the number's like at 4,000 RPM, if it's out of balance by, it's like 10 grams or something like that, it's equivalent to like a 400-pound, hit impact. So, and that's on every piston every time. So the idea is you balance things out so it's not out of balance.
So these weights basically directly correlate to each of the rod piston assemblies.
Correct.
Then he puts it on this machine, spins it, and the machine tells him where to take weight out of the crank.
Yep. Yeah, it's measuring. It's got load sensors on both of those ends, so it's measuring how much it does the same thing as a tire balancer does. So it senses that, and it gives him a direction on there. And based on his experience, he knows how much to drill out or take away from counterweights on each end. Because there was times where he was taken out of the front, but he really needed to, according to the machine, needed to come out of the back. But knowing that if you take so much out of the back, then you throw the front out of whack. So he was taking some out of the front and gaining it in the back. It's a balancing act.
He's done it a bunch.
He's done a bunch of them. Yeah.
Again, you can see all the engines in the
Yeah,
background.
and back to that bob weight. So when you talk about that, what that weight was attached to there as it's being slung, that weight encompasses the piston and everything's matched. So every piston was the same weight or made to be the same weight. The rods are all made to be the same weight. Those are your two main components. Then you have your wrist pin and your rings, and it accounts for that complete assembly and the bearings. So really the only thing that would be left is if in use, if one ring or one piston assembly had more oil on it than the next, which isn't enough to make a difference.
Yeah, so you don't really see it much here, but you see that he's weighing the ends of the, not just weighing them as a whole thing, where the weight actually is.
Yes.
And then, weighing the
pistons out.
He's weighing, there's the
and then at the end of the day, you get I have a balance sheet.
Yep.
So if I need to, let's say we had a problem down the road, you want to hang on to these balance sheets, because if you run into a problem later, and let's say you burn a hole in a piston, you have to replace a piston. It doesn't damage anything else, whatever, but you need to just replace that piston. Well, you can come back to this and say, hey, I need a piston that weighs, in this case, 678. And then you match it, and then you can put it right back together. You don't have to rebalance the whole works.
Oh, that's cool. All right, so get through that. Lots of drilling and spinning and drilling.
And you see these got the balancer and the flywheel on there. That's important as well. All
part of the spinning assembly.
Yep. Though, since it's internally balanced, those are zero balanced, or considered zero balanced on the.
And you just get to enjoy yourself over there.
I did. Yeah, we were swapping stories. I was asking him a lot of questions. He was probably, I was like my 9-year-old boy asking me everything under the sun.
Right. Or like me with you whenever we do any of this stuff. Hey, wait, Davin, why are you doing that? Why?
Any knowledge you can gain, ask.
So assembling the pistons now.
Yep, so using heat induction to heat up the small end of the rod and basically physically forcing not forcing because it's opened up and slide the wrist pin in.
But quickly.
Oh yeah, because it cools quick. Everything's a heat sink. So we are now over at Travers Body and Paint using their wash bay and cleaning everything up. Even though this just came out of the washer, you still have to do that fine tune.
You want that paint to stick.
Yeah, and you want the paint to stick. So Dawn dish soap to the rescue and in a solution and brush everything out, dry everything up real well. That is the key, by the way, is as you dry that, it doesn't show any of that, but so after you're washing it is you need to blow, I probably blew air across it, every hole, everywhere.
You might see it.
And you see just a little haze, right there, but now we just jump off it, So by no means let it sit in the corner and dry itself, because you will have a surface rusted piece of iron. Tape everything off that you don't want painted.
And then you're using an automotive paint?
Yes, yep. Use in fact, there's a automotive sealer. That was the gray part, and then PPG happens to be mixed automotive paint,
Okay.
and that is still by far the best way I've found. Although there might be another coating that I'm interested in trying. We'll have to see.
All right.
But this works very well. It holds up, keeps a nice gloss. It's always better than rattle can, but sometimes that's what you have to use.
And thanks to Traverse Body and Paint for, again, you know, like any of these guys, letting us come in there and
take over their space.
right, not only get the work done, but, you know, me sticking cameras on things.
And completely kill their efficiency for the day.
Can you do this, but do it at like a quarter of the speed that you normally do it? Thank you.
Yeah. So back at the shop, self-peeling tape. Oh, got an arm
Phantom
in there.
arm coming in there.
That was a shadow. Must have been a shadow.
Looks good. Shiny.
Yeah, it is shiny. So putting in cam bearings with I think this might be the first time it was the second time we used this tool. Brand new tool. Man, it works so nice.
Up until the last engine and this engine, every time we went to do this, it was
A nightmare.
oh no, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And we borrowed 4 different tools that sort
Well,
of
and you
worked,
quickly found out that wore-out tools didn't work very well unless you were using them every day.
We definitely,
So invest in a cam tool, or have the shop do it, I guess. But
we definitely went through a couple bearings that ended up in the recycle bin.
The flathead was 2 sets of bearings. The Mopar was 2 sets of bearings.
We don't tell anybody that we do anything wrong.
Oh, that's right.
Everything's perfect.
Yep. Putting in brass freeze plugs. You notice I invested in some nylon drivers.
There was a question in terms of what you were putting on the freeze plug.
Yeah, so I always put on the freeze plugs either steel or brass. I use high tack is what it's called, like a gasket. Call it a liquid gasket maker. It is sticky, nasty crap, but it works really well. The point being is any additional surface imperfections, like from rust or whatever, it just gives it a better chance to seal. And I prefer the brass freeze plugs over the steel. I feel that they move better. Not that steel are bad by any means, and it looks sexier.
It does look nice.
Unless you want them to blend in, then that's fine too.
Yeah. I love our autonomous engine.
The motorized crane is really
Picker.
nice, yes. And again, using our serpentine belts, away she goes.
There's not a video that goes by where people go, "What are you using that serpentine belt for?"
They're beautiful. They don't, I mean, in that case, you don't have to worry. You put a chain around there and you're beating up your main.
Yep.
And now, like a nylon strap would do the same thing, but the rubber's nice. And self-peeling tape again, as it rotated. Did you check that out? Stuff just falls off. It's great.
Okay, so here's another important step of the process.
Yep. So even if you buy rings that don't need to be filed, let's say, you still want to check them. So what you end up doing is you put them, and I happen to buy this fancy little tool, you can use whatever, but the idea is you want to have the rings square to the bore, put them down about 1 inch roughly. I think that puts them down maybe 1/2 inch, but somewhere below the lip.
That's this tool.
Yeah, that's
here.
what this tool is. Yep, right there. And you can see it's adjustable for multiple. It's pretty handy. But that takes, and you set the ring down in there, and then you use a pair of feeler gauges, which is this. And then I have my directions up here in the corner. I can't quite see them here. Right there. So, and what that amounts to is the ring manufacturer will tell you, all right, for the compression, the top ring or the second ring, you want X amount of clearance for every inch of bore. In this particular case, it was, if I recall, it was 4 thousandths clearance in gap for every inch of bore. This is roughly 4 inches. It was, I forget exactly. So I actually, and you can always set them just a little bit more. The last thing you want is them to be tight. So I set them to, I think it was 20, sorry. I set both of them at 20. That way, I think it probably was 4.5 on that. But anyhow, whatever it says, run it there. The normal run is someplace between 18 and 22 is pretty typical.
So you can see you have your ring set down in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I'm going in, and then up here in this corner, right up here in the vise, is a ring filer. So the idea is you take and you can see it right there. Yep. Take and push it up in there, and then you spin it. It's like a diamond wheel, and it grinds off real slow. Go slow. What I end up doing is I push against it. You get a feel for how hard you're pushing, because that changes how much it takes off. And then I count the turns. So, 10 revolutions might be, 2 thou or something like that, whatever it works out to be. And you just keep going back and forth. And then just before you, and that's what this is here, is a little hand file. As you're filing into that ring, you will raise a burr up on the opposite side. And you want to take your hand file and just lightly hit those edges and take the burr off. You don't want any burr. That burr will score the bore. And you kind of lost the whole point. I mean, to some extent. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it's
those little things. It's all those
little
things.
It's the little things.
We talked about how all those little things can add up to the problem that we had with it.
Oh, exactly right.
When you're putting it back together, it's those little things that will hopefully avoid those bad things.
Exactly. And then as you do those, it is extremely important. You are setting them, the end gaps, relative to that bore. So that set to that bore, keep them straight. Here's number 8, here's 7, 5, 6, so on and so forth. As I go through them, I keep them together. And then put a big do not touch these.
I think actually before you've taken just like a little piece of tape and like taped them to the table.
Yeah, when it was going to be a little long. We put these in the next day so that we didn't have that much of time. Now I'm going through and checking my bearing clearances, torque all the mains in, use the comparator gauge to go in and check them, write down my numbers, 2.5 thou. 2.5 on everything, but the rear is at 3, which is dead perfect for what I wanted. And I use the previous bolts for that, just as a point. The red assembly lube, I have found stays where you put it. So that is why I have changed. Now, not that the typical white molybdenum isn't good, but I like this a lot better. It stays there. It doesn't drip, and it's the choice of Top Fuel dragsters. I mean,
that's where we picked it up from.
That's where I got it from. Was from Schumacher. So
if you go back and look at our previous Redline rebuilds when we've used the molybdenum, in the time lapses, you can see you put all that stuff on there, and then you see it all just go and glue down. And this stuff you could leave for a week, and it would
stay right there,
exactly the same.
It does. It works really nice.
I feel like you can use less.
Oh yeah,
it's staying
you do.
In place.
Oh heck yeah.
Where you used to just be like,
I'd use a whole tube because you kept reapplying it,
Yep.
and then it's in the pan, and so yeah. But anyway, and it all mixes in with the oil when you start up. There's no concerns there. That is what it's for.
So you torqued with the old main bolts, but everything's getting old new set of ARP
brand
bolts.
new ARPs. Yep, all ARP bolts with washers, using the lube, the Ultra Torque lube, and then going to I forget what those were. That makes a difference here. Yeah, so mains got torqued to 100 foot-pounds. And do that in increments. I can't stress that enough. You can't expect the part to come down and set nice where it needs to, nice and level, by torquing one bolt to 100 foot-pounds and leaving the other one loose. So they always, the general rule of thumb is take whatever your max torque is and divide it into three steps in some amount, and go, so for instance, do one bolt at say 30, the other one at 30, and then bounce it up to maybe 60 and 60, and then 100 and 100.
So you'll go 30 through every single one of them, and then 60
No, because I usually put them on you want to put them on one at a time.
Okay.
And the reason I put them on, main caps on one at a time, or torque them one at a time, because you torque it and turn it to make sure that cap didn't bind up.
So you know if there's a bind,
So
you know which one
exactly
it is.
right. Yep.
I got you.
Yep, exactly. And caps have we talked about before, caps have an absolute position and an absolute direction. So from the factory, most of the time there's an arrow pointing to the front that's cast right into the cap, and then and a lot of them will even, some of the manufacturers will put a cast-in number as well. Otherwise, during your teardown procedure, you need to make sure it has numbers on it, because you do not want to. I've had that where you got one switched, wasn't not labeled or whatever, and you got it flip-flopped, and then it bound up. And
now here you are.
oh, so here what I'm doing is crankshafts. Every crankshaft will have one bearing that's considered a thrust bearing. On Chevys, it's typically
you're using that against the surface here.
Yeah, I'm just using it just to grab off the crankshaft. So what I'm doing is your crankshaft, you have clearances on the radius side of things, but then you also have in clearance going back and forth. And the bearing at the back, the main bearing, has the thrust surface on there. So what I'm doing is prying the crankshaft all the way to the back, zeroing my dial indicator, or at least knowing what that number is, and then pulling it all the way back this way. Okay. And there I'm just pushing on it. At the end of the day, you usually use a screwdriver or something in there to put some real load to it. So you want to pry it all the way one way and all the way back. That gives you your in clearance. There it is with the screwdriver there. Yeah. Yep. So checking it, and it's like 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000. I forget what the exact number is. So actually, what the exact number on that was 4,500.
There you go.
They had my so yeah. So as you're building an engine, do yourself a favor and write everything down of what you set it to. Because let's say you run into a problem and something happens, and the first thing somebody's going to ask you is, well, what did you set this or that at? Well, if you don't know, you can't answer them, and they can't give you an answer. It's as simple as that. And it makes you look like you know what you're doing, if nothing else.
If somebody just walks into your garage and sees a bunch of big, long decimal point numbers, they go, man, this guy's smart.
Wow, yeah, he knows all the math.
Getting pistons ready to go.
Yep, so now just, going through and putting in the rod bearings and checking the clearance, torque the cap down, check the clearance. Obviously, take the cap back off, write down my numbers, and then putting your rings and such on. Rings have a position. There is a top and a bottom, and then there's your oil control rings. Your oil control rings they don't care which one's top or bottom. They're both the same. But the idea is you do have to locate the in gaps where they need to be at.
Right. So you
don't want them in line. It's kind of like building a brick.
You're pulling your
wall.
rings over from your numbered things, which were over here.
Correct.
All these are the same. All these are the same. So the oil control rings plus the retention. Or what do they call this?
Well, you have the top ring and the bottom ring relative to the oil control. The oil control is that corrugated one.
Gotcha.
And oil the cylinders before you put them together, before you put the pistons in there. Oil the piston itself, as you can see, as it starts to get sloppy there in the valley. Also make sure that you put the piston in correctly, because there is a right side. I call it, not necessarily, I'm not talking about the rod coming out of up to the cylinder head. Yes. What I mean is the orientation of the top of the piston makes a difference. One is going to be relative to the intake and one's relative to the exhaust, and you need to make sure that you have them correct. Otherwise, in this case, the top of that piston has about a little over a 1/4 inch dome. It will slam into that flat spot on the head. And I've seen where people have put that together wrong. One side's right and one side's wrong because they forgot they had to flip things around.
The other important thing too, as you're dropping them in here, is where your rings are oriented.
Yeah, so the idea, what I touched on briefly is, so when you put your rings in, you want to stagger them. And I'll equate it to building a brick wall. You stagger your bricks so you don't have a straight path. It's stronger. Now, granted, we're not trying to make anything stronger, but you don't want a straight leak path. It's the same principle.
Air or oil.
Air or oil, yep, exactly. Now they do rotate, but you start off with them at least. And then using the kind of universal ring compressor, and these all went in nice and smooth. I think I'm finally breaking that ring compressor rim. I didn't have to use my old one. I finally got this one to work well. Nice. And again, rotate a little bit, one at a time, torque them down, rotate them. Nothing's
making sure
bound up. Yep.
Spinning freely. Yep. More lube. Camshaft time. So tell me, we definitely had a bunch of questions about cam specs and that sort of thing. So give them to me.
First off, everyone needs to understand that there are two different general styles of camshaft. There's what they refer to as a flat tappet, meaning the lifter is dead flat across the bottom and it doesn't have a roller. It's a flat surface on the camshaft. That is a flat tappet. And then you have two different lifters. You have a mechanical lifter or a solid lifter, and you have a hydraulic lifter. All that makes difference is hydraulic takes up the lash with oil pressure. A solid lifter, you set the lash. And as the temperature goes up, that lash reduces. Then you have and this is not new technology. I love that everybody thinks roller camshafts are new technology. The 1917 Peerless has a roller camshaft in it. So roller camshafts are nothing new. The idea is instead of that being a flat surface and it's metal to metal scrubbing, right? You have a roller, needle bearing roller that rolls across that surface. The advantage is you can get a more aggressive cam lobe. It can open and close, or the ramp rate is much faster. You improve efficiency in the combustion chamber, which means you get more power. And, well, quite frankly, that's the point.
That's what we want.
Right? That's always the point. I've yet to hear anyone say, I need to build a motor that makes less power. Now, maybe if you have a 3,000 horse motor and you're trying to run it on the street, yes, you might want 300 instead. But for the most part,
I don't think
buy a different car.
Right. Take a 3,000 and make it 300.
So this is a hydraulic roller camshaft. There's multiple advantages, like I already said, based on the design of the cam profile. The other advantages are the roller camshafts are not as susceptible to the issue with zinc in the oil. So do you still need zinc? Yes, you still need zinc because you still have rings, you still have other parts that need some amount of zinc to function. However, the camshaft does not care because now you've taken away that friction of the flat tappet against the camshaft and that heat and wear and the amount of buffer that it needs for the oil lubricity, if you will. So with that said, you eliminate that crazy crap of starting up an engine and immediately yanking it to 3,000 RPM and hanging out for 25 minutes.
Hoping that something doesn't go wrong.
Exactly
otherwise.
right. Yeah. So you don't have to do that. I know everybody swears that, oh, you didn't break anything in. Right. No. You still break stuff in, meaning you drive things conservatively until you kind of run it through its paces and make sure everything was okay.
Yep.
So you lube up the camshaft just like you normally do, but the point is you don't have to break it in like you do a flat tappet camshaft. The hydraulic rollers are beautiful. You don't, at the same time, if you're going to rebuild that, it doesn't matter which set of lifters go on what lobe because it's not broke in specific to that lobe. I mean, it has a ton of advantages from, call it usability or friendliness. Now, with all that said, we took, that camshaft was miserable, the one that was in it. It was a stock cam. The lift wasn't all that great. It was probably 480 roughly, and which is pretty low. And duration was probably about the same, I suppose. But we bounced this up to, let's see the numbers. The gross valve lift is 566, and it's considered advertised is a 280, but it's the actual duration is like 224.
So you're moving a whole lot more air and fuel.
Yeah. So you got a lot more lift, but then your duration isn't so crazy that you're losing call it the compression, I guess, I think is the right way to put it. But that lower duration helps the torque. And there is ridiculous amount of information going around how camshaft design is, and I don't pretend to know anything after what I just said. I do take recommendations from the manufacturers. This comp cam was recommended for what we're doing and all the whole package of things. So
here's your puller installer
plus my spacer that happens to be exhaust tubing, but yeah. So you had to basically you need to install that timing gear on without using a hammer, because remember we went set that in play at 4.5 thousandths. Well, if you take a hammer and beat it on, you're beating against that surface,
right? And
you're gonna call it mushroom it. Now the hammer I'm using there is not for that purpose.
Right, that's not what we're doing, right?
Yeah. Which I probably should have put in the first place, but that's okay. And yeah, so we go through and we degree the camshaft, and we're actually going to do a individual video of how to do that, or how we do that.
Probably when we get around to doing the Buick.
Yeah,
we'll do a video about that.
And I use the intake centerline method. It's what they
and the coat
spec out on the
coat hanger method.
Yep. You always use a coat hanger wherever you can. Since exhaust systems last so much longer, the coat hangers, you got to use them for something.
Okay, getting the heads ready.
Yep. So again, fresh parts all the way through this. Ultimately, even I ended up swapping the studs as well, because I didn't like the rocker arm studs after I got them in. But
yeah, I was going to say, those are the old ones.
Yeah, those are the old ones. They had some wear to them.
Grabbing some ARP.
Yep. So brand new springs happen to be dual springs. I like the dual springs over singles because you're not asking a single wound spring to do as much, or a dual wound spring to do as much work.
So somebody asked about the blue grease here.
Yeah. So after installing the first one, and gravity kept out my keyway, right? Because you got the little the keepers that you're putting in there. I went over, grabbed the cabinet, and grabbed the just wheel bearing grease.
Just so they stick.
So they stick. That's all it is for. And I could have used the red. I could have used probably anything. That was handy. It got a little paint, got a little acid brush in there, and just dab it on there, and it sticks amazingly well.
So you started off with the old ones.
Yeah. Yep, so we set the old ones in here, but then ultimately we swap them out. Fresh valves, we used heavy-duty stainless. And again, the heavy-duty stainless is for that temperature function. They hold up better to heat.
And another case where we have talked about this several times in these, but what you're doing there.
You're asking the springs to open and close when you want them to open and close, and if you don't install them right, they won't have the seat pressure that they should.
Meaning they'll be maxed out and they won't have the valve lifted all the way.
Exactly. Yep. And your camshaft wants a specific amount of load from the lifter to survive as well, because you can put too much spring on them. If you had, let's say it called for a 180-pound spring and you put a 400-pound spring in there, well, it's going to wear that lobe out, because pressure is pressure, even with the roller tip. So you set that. And a roller lifter typically uses a little higher spring pressure anyway, so it can compensate for that. It can keep the lifter in contact with the lobe because of that aggressive ramp brake.
And based on those measurements that you get, you're putting in little spacers to...
Yeah, little shims. So they're just little round shims, flat stock, and they go right underneath the spring into the pocket, and you just adjust that to whatever you need. I think we averaged, they were all a little bit different, but like 30 to 60, I think is what our range was.
Gotcha.
Which that doesn't matter.
Yep.
I mean, even if you had one that was 100, doesn't really affect anything there. I know we have plenty of people that have their opinions on things, and I do as well. So my opinion is I put seals on everything. I put seals on the intake, which it needs, because on your intake stroke is where you have, your vacuum. So you don't want to have, the vacuum from the combustion chamber sucking oil down the valve guides. And in the street application especially, I really hate that puff when you start up a car and it's got oil, and that typically is from the exhaust valves.
Oh, okay.
So and it can be the intakes as well, obviously, but
meaning that while it's sit, it'll kind of leak down in there,
down,
and then that first little thing, you're burning that oil.
Exactly. And I put seals on the exhaust as well. They're 50 cents. And the amount of drag is minuscule.
Some parts to put back on.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? Look how pretty that is.
It is.
I mean, you have fresh parts ready to go. I think that now there's a Where's Waldo on that part, on that table. I don't know if I'll let the cat out of the bag, but there's one part that doesn't belong to this engine on that table, which I think is funny now that we look back at it.
I'm trying to see if I can see it. Is it one of the pulleys?
No.
No?
No, all the pulleys are correct, but it's this.
Oh.
It's this little heat shroud right here.
Oh, yeah.
So I sent that heat shroud to go out. So I had the exhaust components, the exhaust manifolds and the stove there. I had those circ coated, and it's a ceramic coating they spray on, and it's wonderful. It seems to hold up so far just immaculate, very well, and it's a pitch little more silver than I would like. I'd like it a little bit darker from a cast look, but it'll be perfect. But I sent that out at the same time just to have it done because I know it needed to be done. Well, it's for the Buick. So, what the heck.
So this is actually, we haven't really been able to see this much in the previous ones. We've talked about it, but you just talked about making sure the pistons are installed in the correct way. But then as far as what you're using the clay there for.
Right. So as I go through and do my final assembly, there's still always some mock-up function. Now, what I'm mocking up here is what that lift is going to do to the clearance to the piston. So valve clearance to the piston face. I use the old gasket, and it's a 40 thou. I went to an 80 thou. That's a direct number. I mean, add 40 thou to the clearance type of thing. But you want to, you mock it up such that you have pistons in it, and you put on your rockers and use some push rods, and actually end up using lifters in there that are solid. They're not hydraulic, or made solid, I should say. So you're not losing anything deflection wise, because you want to go through the full stroke. And I could have taken and reduced the spring pressure as well, because the idea is it just needs to hold the retainers. Push it down. You're pushing the valve as you go through the stroke of the crankshaft. The valves are moving down, towards the piston and such, and you want to make sure you got plenty of clearance. Rough numbers, 100 thou for your at least 100 thousandths on intake, and maybe 150, 180 on exhaust, because the exhaust tend to, they grow obviously.
But you had plenty.
Oh, I had all kinds.
You can see how thick.
Oh, yeah. I think I had 300 and 400, if I remember right. So that means there's room to grow. We could throw, bigger rockers on, more aggressive ratio on the rockers.
So there's.
But now here's the new head gasket. And these are multi-layer cosmetics. You can order these in virtually any thickness you want. Now, the reason you change thickness is you adjust that combustion chamber size so you can change your compression ratio. You don't want to get too crazy on your compression ratio because you can't buy, you can buy fuel for it. You just might not be able to buy fuel in the part of the country that you're in. Right. So I try to stick. Especially
for this one, which it's going to be used by a bunch of people, and you want to be able to, wherever you are, get pump gas, good to go.
And again, my version of pump gas is not 87 octane for my daily driver.
Right.
93, 89, and the big block on their head design, you can get a little bit more compression for detonation, relative to detonation. You're not going to detonate because of the combustion rate size. The number should be, that ceiling is about 10, where a small block is about 9.5. So you get a little bit more. I'm kind of pushing the envelope here a little bit, but it so far is proving to be fine. And you can see there's fresh, we got fresh rocker studs in here at this point.
Yep.
And back up, right? Go one more so the white button shows. All right, white button. If you're a Ford guy or a Mopar guy, you're probably like, what in the world is that white button doing? A portion of engines have a cam retainer plate. So you put the camshaft in, and underneath the gear, there would be a plate that holds the camshaft from coming out. Big block Chevys and small block Chevys do not use a retaining plate. Later years they do. They didn't in the earlier ones. So what you have to do specifically on a roller camshaft, because you don't want them to move such that the lobe to move too far to keep that roller in the center, is and the spring force tends to push it. As the camshaft spin, it wants to come forward. So that button is to hold it. The button rides on the back side of the, hits your timing cover. So that's what, the timing cover ultimately holds it in there, but you have a button to make up that space.
Gotcha.
Torque everything down, put a new seal in it, obviously. Make sure you lube the lip seal on the crankshaft seal on the timing cover before you put your balancer on. And now, let's see, we're putting the lifters in. They have these are considered retro lifters because this was not a block that had roller lifters. And I think we talked about it with the Pontiac, but the idea of that tie bar is it holds the lifters from spinning. Because on a flat tappet, it can spin wherever it wants to because it's the profile on the bottom is exactly the same. If a roller lifter spins, you got big problems because it doesn't like that. So you have to hold that lifter from rotating.
Be like trying to ride a bike with your front
handlebars
turning this way.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at go back to the Hemi video, the Demon motor. If you look at the Demon motor has stock roller lifters in it, and it shows those retention plates that they used to hold that from rotating. So more, lube everything up good. Again, this Redline oil here stays, or assembly lube stays in there very nice. And
we didn't go with full rocker, or what do they call it? The difference between the dual and the...
Yeah, we didn't. We used this, call it a standard fulcrum. These are competition product, or Comp Cam's Magnum rockers, and they're only roller tip. The base, the pedestal at the stud rocker. So the pivot point at the stud isn't a roller; it's the traditional fulcrum function.
And if you go back to the GTO, that's a full.
That's a full rocker. Now, the reason we did not do that on this particular motor is I wanted to maintain an outward appearance of stock. Now, when it's running, you can hear the rollers, but it's dead stock when you look at it, meaning the chrome valve covers without a big spacer. If you look at the Pontiac, we put a spacer on there to clear because they get big. They start to get really big when you go to that.
And you also have the air pump too, all that stuff that at least on the outside you pop the hood and you go,
exactly.
It's a stock.
Yep. Now everybody will say, well, you just said it's going to look stock on the outside, and then you put an aftermarket intake manifold on it. Yep, 100%. We did.
And part of that was due to the sealing issue that we had with the
suspect.
stock one.
Yeah, the stock one was suspect. It was suspect when I initially put it together. And then after all that oil, I decided to say, you know what? This makes a nice shelf ornament, and put it over there. And then, this intake will make a little more power. Obviously, it's a little lighter. Not that that's a hill of beans difference with the amount of weight that the big block has anyway, but it's something. And so we went with a dual plane intake manifold, and you'll see later we make one more change, but that's where we're at here. So the idea behind this engine and the car, so yes, it's stock relative to the outside. We made some improvements in the inside for more durability and usability. So
making sure that thing was behaving itself.
that's right.
You stay right there.
That's right.
Starter.
Yep. Starter, fuel pump.
Getting there.
Exhaust manifolds on. Aren't they sexy though?
They look
They're
good.
pretty.
I
hold
do
up
agree.
really
They are
well.
bright.
They are bright, but
They look good, especially with the shiny new paint.
Yeah. They look really good. And on that initial fire up and drive, we've driven it now, another 100 miles or so. They look exactly like that. I mean, no burn, no nothing.
Nice.
There's the air pump going on.
Everything fits in there nicely. It's crazy how it all, it's like a puzzle.
Yep.
Fits all in there. Sucking power.
Yeah, exactly.
The engine.
Parasitic power at its finest.
Add some more friction.
Yep. And then go through and set all the valve lash, and we're going to do a video on that here, and I believe like a live stream as well, possibly. But set all the valve lash. There is, I don't want to say there's one way to do it. There's the way that's, call it the best way. So, for those that watched at the very beginning, and they said, hey, you had a bone stock, numbers matching Camaro, and you yanked the intake manifold off, and now you've put on a Holly carburetor. I never had a Holly carburetor, and those are junk, and that Quadrajet from GM was so much better. Well, you know what? I'm not going to argue whether one's good or not. Here's the fact of life. The fact of life is this car's out on the road, and it needs anything for the carburetor.
Yep.
And you walk into any parts store in America, and you say, I need parts for a Quadrajet. They're going to be we don't have any. You need a gasket? We got a gasket for it. Well, I need to rejet it. Oh, wow, we don't have any of that.
Yep.
So, but you go and you roll in and say, hey, you got any parts for Holly carburetors? You can look at the wall of jets, even at your box store, auto parts stores, and they'll be like, what jet do you want, sir? We have all the parts. Which
is particularly important for Hagerty because we have an office in Golden, Colorado.
Exactly.
That is a mile above sea level, and they have taken it up Pikes Peak and that sort of thing before. So the ability of somebody with a little bit of know-how that can rejet the carburetor for that purpose is...
Exactly. And if you're trying to change jets on the, make adjustments to that Quadrajet, and the way that's designed, when you lift that top cover off, if you don't have your ducks in a row putting that back together, the needles that go into the jets will be bent like switchgrass. I mean, they'd be nasty. So that is why we changed it for that particular reason. And you know what? And right now, all you can see is the feed line. So
it probably doesn't have 325 horsepower anymore.
Yeah, probably not.
Do you have a rough estimate? People have been asking, can you dyno it? And we'll try and dyno it if we get a chance to, at least wheel what it's making at the wheels.
We could certainly do a chassis dyno on it. If I had to make an educated guess on the camshaft, compression's about the same, ratio-wise, calculation about the same as what it was. Intake manifold's going to improve it some. I mean, you're going to be in the... You might have gained 50 horse, quite honestly. I think that fairly conservative. So I would say at the back of the motor, what that engine puts out is probably about 375, maybe a little higher than that. Torque should definitely be improved. It should be in the 450 range, I'm going to say.
Nice.
And now, granted, at the wheel, you're probably looking at about 300, because you lose a bunch going through everything. It's not as bad, of course, with the Muncie as it would be a automatic tranny, but yeah, so that's where I would ballpark it at.
And then one quick thing, 396, it's 60 over now, which makes it what?
I think that works out to like a 409. I mean, ultimately.
So fine.
Yeah.
I'm going to take take a minute to pat myself on the back for
this was
my
fantastic.
transition.
Yeah.
Which I think there was 1 or 2 comments of people that caught it and liked it. But yeah, you'll see that the seamless transition of
going from the assembly stand to the startup stand.
At this point, we were like, we needed to get the thing on the stand and in the car like that day. And I was just like, Davin, just do this and do the stuff. We're not going to time lapse it. Just get it done.
Yep. Yeah. So when Ben says he doesn't do any hard work, I wouldn't have the even the starting point of knowing how to do that. So
I only made you
hats
do that.
off. That was awesome.
Made you do that walk like 15 times,
something like
or
that.
So.
Yeah. Well, if I could have done it right the first time, it'd have been better.
Yeah. Do you will ignore the typical internet? Oh, you shouldn't use this oil. This is the oil that you should use because it is what it is.
Everyone has their brand preference.
Obviously, we have a little bit that we have to deal with, which is what it is. But it's by no means going to ruin the motor. The main question, though, is why the 25W50 as opposed to something thinner?
Right. So this 25W50 has higher zinc content. Now, I know we talked about you don't need a bunch of zinc relative to the camshaft because it's roller camshaft. However, I'm still breaking a motor in. I'm still waking it up for the first time. I know the zinc is not a bad thing for that. So that's what I put in it. Right. Now, the 2550, maybe that's a little aggressive, but at the same token, again, back on that startup, I know I'm going to have solid oil pressure on a lot of it. And as we go, we certainly can drop, as this motor goes through its paces and gets broke in and such, we can certainly drop down to a 1040. I'm not comfortable with a 530 in the old iron. Now, that's not to say it can't be used, but I wouldn't personally probably go under a 1040 myself.
No. Cool. Hopefully that answer makes some people happy. It's the internet, so it's never going to make everybody happy.
Typical drop in the, and something I'll note real fast. First problem I always had, multiple times, dropping in the distributor after setting the timing, or setting the, putting your timing gears in, right? When you set them up, you put your dot at the very bottom of the top gear, and the crankcase gear is at the very top. So 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. The idea is they're close together so you can tell if they're aligned, right? Now, I don't want to tell you how many motors I put together and then could never get them to fire up initially. They would always backfire through the carburetor. And I would drop the distributor down right here, just like this. That vacuum canister on these should point right towards number 1, or I should say the vacuum canister. The rotor should be pointed right towards number 1. Right here. Sorry. Yep. So as I drop this in, the canister is going to twist around to the right there, but so that should be pointed towards the number 1 cylinder. Okay. And obviously the cap goes on that way. Did a multiple of them. I'm like, man, every time I'm getting this thing in 180 degrees off. I can't remember if I don't think I turned the crankshaft, before, blah, blah, blah. Well, the problem is when you set that, it's perfect. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. But that's firing number 6, which when you look at the firing order is exactly 180 degrees off from firing number 1. So the key is rotate the engine, be positive, put your finger in the spark plug hole, rotate it by hand, and you will feel the compression stroke. Yep. Stop there. Set your balancer on the timing mark. That's number 1. Drop your distributor in.
Evidenced by when we go to start it up.
It fired right up. Now, that is not saying that I did it wrong on any of the other motors that we had problems with, but that's something I learned specifically to the Chevys.
And our easy run stand. And, of course, we had the car.
Yep.
To put it back in, which some of our Redline rebuilds we haven't, and people give us a hard time for that, but it's just a matter of what we have access to and that sort of thing. It's just the nature of what we do. But we opted to put this on the engine stand. Why?
I like to take advantage of the engine stand to fire it up, debug anything without leaning over fenders. Because let's say, just by chance, it either blows oil everywhere, or maybe you start putting coolant in it and you start getting more of it in the pan, oil pan, than what's not supposed to be there
Not
at all.
like that's ever
Not that
happened
we've ever had that problem with one, but you can do a quick, easy debug for the, I think I had an afternoon, so 3-4 hours to get it on, put it on and take it back off to be ready for the car. Right. So, but you fire it up, we had a couple fuel leaks just at the carburetor, nowhere else, but just there. And it's just easier to fix it right there, address it right there on the
Because heaven forbid you get it completely in, something spewing somewhere, and then you have to yank the whole thing out again. Instead of an afternoon, you're talking like multiple days.
Right. Yep.
Cool. And fortunately for us here, let's see, we'll unmute it here. We got it figured out this time, but...
Yep, so initially you're eyeballing that timing mark, but backed it off a little bit. Bada boom.
And yes, we use some editing tricks from time to time, but that was how it went. It did a little choke.
No, that was 100%.
You turn what gave it, less timing?
Yeah, back to timing. And we, filled up the carburetor, put fuel into the carburetor because we're using the mechanical pump here, so we can have that pre-charge of electric pump. But then it just fired right up.
And it sounds way stronger than it did when we pulled it in.
Yeah. So in comes the car, and
basically reverse order.
Yeah, reverse order, bolt everything up. I'll tell you what, I thought I was going to lose it though, lifting that Muncie up in there because I was adamant that I was doing it myself. I would recommend help.
Some more help.
It's easy to get the Muncie up off the ground, but then taking it from here to here is a little more difficult than I remember.
And they call that a clean, right? Where you pull it from there.
Yeah. So, and then when I jumped, I hit my head on the, oh boy. Anyhow.
This is nice to have this time around.
I'll tell you what.
That thing.
I personally have the chain style leveler, and we didn't use a leveler, nothing to pull it out with. We just used we just grabbed it with a regular hook. But that pivot is nice.
Yeah,
that
you can see it go back and forth there to adjust it to get it up to where the engine mounts were.
Yeah.
It just looks nice. See, you look at it on the table over there, and you're like,
yeah. It's a quality part for sure.
And we're not even being paid to say that.
No, that's legit. That's always legit, but you know what I mean. Bell housing back in, tranny in. Make sure you get your linkages correct on the transmission, or it will not shift right.
Drive shaft.
Drive shaft in.
That cursed Holly carburetor on there.
Get the Holly back on. We took it off for the lift plate was all.
Radiator.
Radiator in.
All the little bits.
Yep. Top off the radiator. I take my time doing that, by the way, because it burps. Mm-hmm. And help putting the hood in. Get everything lined up. Be careful. I was a little nervous here with the hood because we did make a change. We had a different intake and a different carburetor. Oh, yeah. So close that hood slowly the first time so you know you have clearance and don't get a big dome in your hood. Right. There's a ways to get, some things you can do to adjust for that, air cleaner base-wise and all that. And I am bird's eye view actually looking to make sure that this is not going to hit. But this hood has a nice little dome in it from the factory, so it's good. And this is the proper way to close a hood. I love it when I see anyone taking it from here
and just going
and gorilling it down.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
shut your shed door that way, not your hood on your car that you paid a lot of money for, even if it's a new one. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure why nobody likes my glasses. I grew up in the 80s, and those are the best glasses. And actually, they're safety glasses.
So the only time you wear safety glasses?
I wear safety glasses all the time.
When you're driving?
And, we warmed this up really well on the engine stand. We certainly did not show, it didn't run for that snippet of time. Yes, we ran it up. It got to temperature. It cooled back down. That's the key. So we warmed the engine up on the test stand. Mm-hmm. Right? Got it nice and warm. then let it cool back down to ambient temperature. I mean, this is the next day.
Yep.
So do not think that we took it from off the engine stand.
Hot.
No, the assembly stand.
Right, that's what I mean.
Right from we didn't take it from the assembly stand cold and stick it here, fire it up the first time, back it out, and do this.
Right.
Because that's not the case.
A big part of, you're on YouTube, you're here to be entertained.
Yes.
And we showed you the engine running for an hour to get up to temperature.
Right.
And then just let the video go for a half day
Yeah.
to show that it cooled down.
Right, it would be pointless.
And any time lapse that I would shoot would be dumb because it'd just be the car sitting there with nothing happening.
Yeah,
so
there'd be no movement.
Like,
right.
give us the benefit of the doubt. Davin's done a few of these before. We're generally pretty smart about how we take care of this stuff.
And I have to say, this is something it would not do before.
Because it didn't have enough power.
Right.
Even with the rear end that's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a 308 gear in here, and you'll see it's a peg leg, but
we got a little
yep.
stripe and
chirps,
a little bit of a limp.
Yep, you get a little limp there.
On that end. Which, we can sort of end it with this, which is we're gonna fix that.
Yeah,
Fix
it.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Nope.
But there's a certain amount of fixing to what it maybe should be.
Yeah, and we always, there's always that discussion of, hey, should I change something that's not broke? Mm-hmm. Well, it all depends on what your definition of broke is. I mean, is it broke a pile of parts laying on the ground? Meaning where it's physically broken in chunks that are unusable? Mm-hmm. Or broke meaning it doesn't perform like I want it to perform? In my opinion, this car does way better than it did before. That motor was broke, right? Now there's a performance issue to still fix, and again, a little bit more gear will help that out. Not that it's doggy now, but...
and so the plan is new gear plus...
Make the other wheel spin.
Yeah, so it's getting a limited slip, and if anyone is still watching at this point of this long video, which I hope you enjoyed learning some stuff. I always learn some cool stuff. But there will be a video soon, not just about us doing that, but how to do it. Yeah. So if you have a car of your own that is doing the old one-wheel peel, we're going to walk you through how to fix that.
Fix that problem, exactly. And actually, when that gear's in too, we're going to fix the fact that there's no leaves in the trees.
All right.
We can do that. Because this is what northern Michigan looks like in the first week of April. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, well, I should say the second week in April, because the first week of April, this would have been covered in snow.
Well, again, like you always do.
Yes, nice job.
Strong work.
Nice job.
On the rebuild. That was a fun one. I think even though this wasn't as like resurrecty as the 331 Hemi or even the Buick that we're in process now, the fact that it's back in that car and driving down the road is super cool.
Right there was very satisfying. Mm-hmm. That was good.
Once what you can't see right now is it's up on the lift right now with the whole back end disassembled, and it'll be fun to get that out at the Hagerty Cars and Caffeine and back on driving experiences and all that fun stuff.
And it's going to make it easier for those people to learn on because it'll have a little more power to, when you got that old slip the clutch function trying to teach somebody, if it's got a little more gear and a little more power, it doesn't take as much gas pedal. It just has the torque to move it. Yep. It won't stall out. So
yeah, that's why we did it, right?
That's why I did it.
All right, well, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video, comment. Yep. If you have any other questions about what we talked about, let us know.
Throw them in the comments and we'll answer them as we can. And we'll see you next time because we're doing more.
Yep. Thanks. See ya.